Hi, I've spoken about the supreme good, and that can be quite a strange and nebulous idea. Another way to understand this idea of the supreme good is through what the educationalist Jack Whitehead describes as an educational living theory or living educational theory. Jack Whitehead was senior lecturer for many years at the University of Bath and pioneered this approach to understanding education and other professional practice. He's currently visiting professor at the University of Cumbria, and I do urge you to look up some of his material and discover this for yourself. But your living educational theory are the goods and the values that guide and inform your professional practice, and especially from a virtue ethics point of view, the dispositions and behaviours that are inspired by your values and your understanding of what educational practice is all about. And it is also a question of the influence that you want to have on your students and in the wider community, including your school and perhaps the neighbourhood and society in which your school is located. It's the way that we want to see people flourish as a result of our influence. Let me give you my own career as an example of what I mean. In my early career as a theological educator, I was keen that I should teach the truth to my students, because it's the truth that will set you free. Well, which is true, but I understood this in very abstract terms. That if I taught the right set of truths and my students embraced these, then they would have freedom. And so my commitment was really to the truth and not really to my students. And so the virtues that I was displaying then, because of my commitment to the truth, which was very worthy because I was teaching Christian theology and above all Christian ethics and the virtues that make for the good life. And so I displayed the virtues of gravity, that this was serious, serious stuff. I was vigilant to make sure that the right thing was done. And I was full of zeal for the truth. Because I felt that these were the values, these were the virtues that would enable me to communicate the truth clearly to my learners, who, by and large, although I entertained questions, my expectation was that they should passively receive this. My career moved on, and out of interaction with my students, I developed a greater concern for my learners. And so I became concerned that I became to the realization that I was actually teaching students the truth. And I became much more concerned with their capacity to understand what is true and to willingly and freely embrace it and practice it. So I became much more generous in the way that I interacted with my students and tried to encourage them to learn. I became more patient and tolerant of misunderstanding and what I conceived to be mistakes. And I became much more prudent, looking for the ways that I could help them to better understand the things that we were learning, which meant that I enriched my methodology. But I think the biggest changes came in my later career. Um, in 1998, I began my PhD study, and I began to look at the way that Christian ethics began to be realized within local context and traditions in the African context where I was teaching living syntheses. And so I began to see that things were not as fixed as I thought. That that people embrace the truth and realize the truth in different ways. At that time, I became very concerned that what I had been teaching in my classroom was just too abstract to be real, that I was coming up with all kinds of theories and topics that had no connection with the lives of my students. And so I began to explore something called a critical incident methodology, in which I asked students to reflect on episodes of moral practice and dilemmas within their own experience, which meant that everything was being much more rooted in the way that they were struggling with different dimensions of moral truth. I've actually written a paper on this, which is published in the electronic journal of living theories, and you can look that up. It is called Ethical Incidents. And more recently, because I want to ensure that, see, now I'm beginning to understand that we discover truth together. That actually truth is relational. And as a Christian theologian, I understand that first of all, truth is personal. Jesus Christ says that I am the way, the truth, and the life. And so from the perspective of Christian theology, the way that we really understand the truth is through a relationship with the one who is the truth. But of course, that's not just an individualistic relationship in which I achieve my own individual understanding of the truth and then impose that on everybody else. The church, we are in the community of the church, and together in our relationships with the one who is the truth, we discover truth together. And so truth is relational. And that's led me to make a much greater use of the discussion method, so that while because of my experience, I might understand more, nevertheless, the Lord can speak to me through any of my students as he speaks to them. And so I found this discussion method where we together set out to answer questions, to be very rich and to be a fuller realization of my living theory at this stage in my career. What are the virtues now that I've found that have become important? I would say the virtues of humility, because I've come to the realization that, as is said in Ghana, knowledge is not in one head, and that while because of my experience and journey, I've gained insight and wisdom, I'm not the only one who knows this, and I need to be open for God to teach me more through my students. I think it's maybe much more gentle in my approach, in seeking to appreciate and affirm the truth that my students begin to discover, but also, as the scriptures say, to try and gently correct the things that are not done in love. And I think this has brought greater wisdom to my life as I seek to judge the word of truth correctly and through practice learn the difference between right and wrong, as the author to Hebrews puts it. And I think too that I've developed greater piety. I say that because now I'm much more in awe and reverence of the one who is the truth. And I want to walk before him openly and without arrogance, knowing that actually he truly is the way, the truth, and the life. Now, I've spoken as a theological educator. Your experience will probably be different. You may have a more humanistic understanding of these things. But what is your understanding of your vocation as a teacher? What are the truths and the values and the changes that you've had in your career? What are the values and the changes that you would like to bring about in the lives of your students and of your community, and indeed perhaps in your own life? Do share your narrative. You can write it as a narrative, or you can share it as a recording, either audio or visual. But I do look forward to hearing your contributions and seeing them and reading them. Thank you so much, and I look forward to hearing from you.